So, in this video, we're going to talk about a movie entitled Dead Poet Society. But first, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like the person you are on the outside is not the same as who you are on the inside? That quiet conflict, that pressure to choose between what you love and what others expect from you, that's exactly I'll be exploring today through the character Neil Perry from the Dead Poet Society. But instead of retelling the story, I'm going to guide you through what Neil is going through. It's like we're going to slowly understand what's going on inside his mind. We're going to use two lenses. The first one is the Romanticism as a poetic tradition, and the second one is Carl Rogers' self concept theory as a psychological framework. So let's begin with Romanticism. Romanticism is not just about poetry or literature, it's about the belief that a person's inner voice matters. It values emotion over strict rules, passion over obedience, and individuality over conformity. If romanticism were a voice, I think it would sound like this. Be who you truly are, even the world disagrees. According to Rogers, every person has what we call a real self, who they truly are, and a self they show to others, which is often shaped by expectations. Now, here's the important part. When these two don't match, a person starts to feel tension, not always loud or obvious, but constant. For Neil, his real self is creative, expressive, and passionate. But the version of himself he shows to the world, the one shaped by his father, is controlled, obedient, and silent. So instead of growing as a one whole person, Neil is slowly being divided into two versions of himself. And that division doesn't stay small, it grows. Let's pause here for a moment. This scene, this is Neil without the mask. Look at his face, look at how he moves. There's no hesitation, no fear. He's not asking for approval, he's just being himself. This moment is important because it's one of the only times we see his real self fully expressed. If we connect this to romanticism, this is the ideal moment. A person following passion, a person choosing meaning, a person feeling free. We can even connect this to a line from the poem Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. I celebrate myself and sing myself. That line is simple but powerful. It's about claiming your identity without fear, and for a short time, Neil does exactly that. But here's where things become more complicated because self expression doesn't happen in isolation. It happens within relationship, within family, within society. And in Neil's case, his strongest influence is his father. This moment feels very different. There's tension, silence, control. If the first clip showed freedom, this one shows restriction. His father doesn't just disagree with his choices, he removes his ability to choose at all. And psychologically, this is where Neil's situation becomes critical. In Rogers' theory, when a person is constantly forced to ignore their real self, they begin to feel what we call incongruence, a deep mismatch between who they are and who they are allowed to be. At first, this might look like simple obedience, but over time, it turns into something heavier confusion, frustration, and eventually a sense of being trapped. Neil is no longer just hiding his true self, he's losing access to it. And this is what makes his story different from a typical rebellion narrative. He doesn't fight loudly, he doesn't argue endlessly, and instead, he internalizes everything. And that internal pressure builds quietly but powerfully. Now, if we go back to Romanticism, we can see something important. Romanticism celebrates individuals who follow their passion, but it also tells many tragic stories. Stories of people who feel deeply but live in a world that cannot accept that depth. Neil becomes one of those figures, not because she is weak, but because the space around him is too narrow for who he is. His environment doesn't just limit him, it defines him in a way that leaves no room for his real identity. So when we reach the final part of his story, it's not just about one decision, it's the result of everything that came before. Um, the pressure, um, the silence, the split between his real self and his imposed self. From a psychological perspective, his ending reflects what happens when a person feels they have no control over their own life. From a romantic perspective, it reflects a tragic truth that a person can know who they are and still be unable to live as that person. So, what does Neil Perry's story teaches us? I think it's not just follow your dreams, but something deeper. It teaches us that identity is not something we can force or reshape just to meet expectation. It also reminds us that support matters because self-discovery without support can turn into isolation, and passion, when constantly suppressed, doesn't disappear. It builds pressure. To end this, I want to go back to the question I asked at the beginning. Have you ever felt like your outside self doesn't match your inside self? Neil's story is an extreme example of that feeling, and while not everyone experiences it the same way, his journey helped us understand how important it is to be seen, heard, and accepted for who we really are. Because sometimes what a person needs most is not discipline or direction, but the simple freedom to say, "This is who I am."